Hey guys, welcome back to Sacred Vedic Astrology. My name is Samantha and I feel so blessed to be a professional Vedic sidereal astrologer. So today we're going to go into a more philosophical sort of personal viewpoint video, which I think is a really important topic to actually discuss and unravel, which is why astrology? Like why, right? What is the power? What is the point? What is the use of either studying astrology, getting an astrological chart done, or knowing your transits, knowing your dasha time period? What is the core why behind astrology? And this is something that I ask myself often, and I actually come back to it a lot as like a grounding piece of the work I do. Like I actually constantly ask myself like, okay, why am I doing this? And how do I get more rooted in that sense of why? I think it's really important to talk about because I feel like there's a lot of this consensus that astrology is here to maybe predict or dictate our choices or our future, and it's really not that. And I want to talk about the way that I view astrology and the power of it, and we're going to unravel it in this video. Okay, my main why behind astrology and what I do is actually radical acceptance more than anything else. And I actually was like writing about this and journaling about this not that long ago when I was doing some rebranding and editing some things on my website, and I was sitting with that question of, okay, why did I get into astrology when I was 13? Why did I find it so fascinating? Why do I love astrology so much? And I had to come back to that question and just figure it out again, unravel it even more. And the first thought form that came to me is, oh, I got into astrology and I loved it so much because it gave me so much acceptance of myself and so much radical acceptance about my life trajectory and my soul and who I was, because I talk about this a lot. But the first placement I actually looked up in astrology was moon in the 8th house because yes, I have the moon in the 8th house. And I was always very in touch with psychic and the spiritual, and I would always have really crazy dreams, and I would have dreams that would happen sometimes, and I was always really obsessed with books about like witchcraft and astrology when I was like 13 years old. And I would always call my friends and be like, what sign is the moon today? When I was trying to figure out like, where does all this come from? And I unraveled my astrology chart, and the first thing it said is if you have moon in your 8th house, you're always drawn to the psychic and the spiritual, and you love to study and you love to research and you love to figure out like, why are we here? And you might have psychic prophetic dreams. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is my whole life story. And now I feel very validated in that experience. So that's really what got me into astrology, was trying to unravel or get a deeper sense of who I was and why certain things were the way that they were. Because for me growing up, there wasn't a lot of people that would talk about those more like metaphysical sort of subjects. I mean, I grew up in LA, so weirdly enough, I got lucky in the way that most of my friends were always so fun and spiritual. Like I remember being like younger and we'd make potions in the backyard, or we'd go to the library together and they would also want to like pull out books on like witchcraft, and they'd be like, yeah, let's do this, you know? So I actually got really lucky in that way that so many of my friends growing up were so open to all these like esoteric cool things, and I feel like most of my friends are that way. So I've been lucky in that way. But when I was like much younger, it was very like, you didn't hear much about it, right? Like people weren't talking about astrology and numerology, and I was like, why am I so interested in this? And why does this feel so familiar? And I just love it so much. And it was just like the thing that felt like home to me more than anything else. And through my astrological journey when I was younger, I learned so much self-acceptance. And I think it's why I've really been able to walk my own path very confidently in this lifetime. Like I actually do credit a lot of that to finding astrology when I was younger, because I always had this sense of, oh no, this is exactly who I'm meant to be, and this is exactly who I am, and I can embrace that, and I can be very confident in that. Because I think a lot of the times people ask like, how are you so confident in what you do at this point in life? And I think a lot of that actually came from so much self-discovery and so much self-acceptance when I was younger. That really came from astrology and tarot readings and numerology and all those fun sort of things that really brought me to a place of so much self realization and self-acceptance of who I was. And it's not to say that it was an easy journey. Like there was still, I mean, I knew who I was, and then there was also all these other things going on all the time, which if you guys know, I did a Sati Sati story time about the craziness of my younger years and Sati Sati and et cetera, et cetera. Astrology was also always this like grounding force of like, no, you are actually exactly how you're meant to be, and just embrace that and work with that and accept the good and the bad. It's just really a lot of radical acceptance. I think there might be a misconception that astrology is here to tell you what's wrong with you, or tell you what you need to change, or tell you all these things you need to fix about yourself, right? And this is like a topic for another time, but I actually have some qualms or some issues with a lot of modern spirituality or like modern self-help, just in the sense that I think a lot of it stems from a place of, now you need this, now you have to buy this, now you have to go spend money on this to become the best version of yourself, and now you have to go do this, and you have to do this, and you have to do this, and you have to do this, right? When the truth is, I think my perspective is, like, true healing comes from a place of radical acceptance first. Like, I think that is the start of like healing or stepping into this really better version of yourself, is like, first you accept exactly who you are and your exact design. And then from that place is when you can start to make the changes and evolve, et cetera, right? I don't think that it's always so helpful or useful for people to do all this like self-help stuff that's like, oh my God, get out there and go make $1 million, and what are you doing, and you're lazy. Like, to me, that stuff is silly and counterproductive to some degree, because we all have very different designs. My chart is a chart where I really thrive in spaces where I can either be creative or I can be spiritually inclined, and those are the spaces I've always thrived, and I don't really thrive in any other space, right? So like when I try to work more normal jobs, I was never fulfilled. I wasn't even good at them. Like, I was never good at traditional jobs because my soul was just like not aligned with that sort of blueprint, right? And so if I read some book that's like, go out there, make $1 million, go do this, my soul is gonna be like, whoa, this is not working out for me. There's that other aspect of it where I think a lot of modern self-help is really rooted in this like one belief that is not going to fit for every person on an individualistic level, right? So the power of astrology is the self-acceptance, the radical acceptance, and also knowing that we all have very different blueprints of our soul essence. Something that's going to work for me is not going to necessarily work for the next person, and something that works for that person is not going to necessarily work for me, and et cetera, right? Like, I have clients where their charts are so amazing for them to make a bunch of money and work in these more traditional spaces and climb the ladder and be these like leaders in corporate jobs, right? And it's like, no, your chart's actually great for that because you have a strong sun in your 10th house. Like, you can be the boss, you can be the leader, you can have a lot of success in your career, et cetera. And then there's someone like me who has K2 Saturn in my 10th house, and it's, no, you better work for yourself. You better do a spiritual career path. So there's a lot of layers to this, but I think the main sort of point is that astrology is self-acceptance, self-realization, and it's actually not about changing yourself. It's about knowing what's going to work for you in this lifetime and what's not going to work, right? And there's actually a lot of power in that, right? And I don't mean that in such a fatalistic way of, your chart says this, you can't do this, don't ever try this. It's not that. It's more so like, where are you going to thrive? Where are you going to really find yourself fulfilled? And where are you going to find yourself misaligned or maybe unhappy, right? Because I think a lot of life, in my perspective, is trying to get to a place of just like happiness and enjoying this life that we have. And I think astrology can really help us get there and be like, this would be a great path for you, this could make you really happy, this could fulfill you, and leading someone into the spaces where their energy is naturally going to fit versus where it's not going to fit, right? And there's so much like acceptance and power that can come from that. Like, there's so much relief that I always got out of astrology when I would like read certain things and it would be like, no, you're actually not meant to work a normal job. And I was like, yeah, that's true. Like, thank God. Or when I would see certain things in astrology and it would be like, yeah, you have to, end up with someone who's creative or artistic. And I've always only dated artists and musicians because I'm like, that's just what it is. Like, I'm not going to be with someone who's like boring. Like, I'm just not. Like, I can't, I'd go crazy. And so that was always really validating to my life experience, right? Or another example is like my first ruler is retrograde, which means that I really started to come into myself later on in life, right? Because my whole chart is ruled by a retrograde planet. And that was like so true and so validating to my life experience, is like my life only gets better as I get older because of the ruler of my chart being retrograde, right? So it's all these like very validating, confirming sort of aspects of astrology where it's like, oh yes, that's exactly what it's always felt like, but now there's validation and then there's acceptance, and then we can work and move within the karmas of the chart, quote unquote, or the energy that the chart is trying to show. So to me, astrology is radical acceptance more than it is anything else. And also just knowing like what spaces are you going to fit into, what spaces are going to make you feel your best, what spaces are going to feel a little bit off-putting or maybe uncomfortable to like your soul essence, right? Are you meant to work a more traditional job, or are you meant to be an entrepreneur? Like, we can see that in the chart, right? Are you meant to be with someone who's more creative or artistic? Or are you meant to be with someone who's more Saturn, which is a whole different sort of thing? There's really so much validation that comes through astrology. And I think there's so many misconceptions about astrology and how it's supposed to be utilized. And it's not so much about, here's your astrological chart and here's everything that is bad about you. Because I know a lot of like traditional, more old school, specifically Vedic astrologers will be very fatalistic. Like, I get a lot of clients who come to me and they're like, I went to a Vedic astrologer once and they told me I was never going to get married and I was never going to have kids and blah, 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 and et cetera, et cetera. And to me, that's like trying to play God a little bit, right? Like, I remember I watched this one talk from a Vedic astrologer and I'm blanking on his name, so forgive me on that one, but he was talking about astrology and he was like, he tries to never predict, or he tries to not say a set statement of you will get divorced, you won't have kids, you won't get married, etc. Because he was basically saying that's like playing God, right? That's trying to play God, right? And so astrology isn't that. It's not about playing God or trying to be some sort of fatalistic viewpoint of life. It's more so about knowing how to work with your energy and move better within the free will that we have. If someone's chart is very creative and very artistic, it doesn't mean, hey, you're going to be an artist no matter what and you shouldn't do anything else, right? It's more so, oh, your chart is very creative, like embrace that side of yourself and utilize that as much as you can. And even if you're in more traditional spaces, like, use your creativity, right? Use your artistic talents in those places, or write on the side or whatever, because your soul is still going to want to activate those qualities of the chart, right? If someone has really strong Mars in their 7th house, Kuja dosha, it's like, yeah, you better watch out for constant fighting and friction in relationships. And that's still there. It's still going to play out. It's still an energy. But now that we have the consciousness and awareness, let's like move within that a little bit better. So there's so much power in that level of acceptance. And also knowing that like advice or self-help or a lot of these like healing modalities are very like one size fits all, right? Like, I could read some sort of book that's like how to become the best, most successful version of yourself, right? But like, I have Jupiter in Sagittarius, so I want to have fun and I want to be philosophical, and that's just what it is. Like, I'm not going to work in some boring space and maybe this book is, you should do this, and it's like, that's not going to work for my chart. I have a really strong Jupiter. I need to have fun and be free and be philosophical. That's who I am. Okay, you get what I'm saying? Like, this sort of one size fits all advice or guidance rarely works because we're all such unique individualistic people. And so the beauty of astrology is like, hey, this would actually work better for your chart, right? Or this might be something that really resonates with you, and That would be really great for your chart, even though that might not work for someone else's chart or someone else's life story or their life experience, right? And something I find is like, there's just so much wisdom that comes from acceptance, right? As opposed to trying to control and shift and make something out to be what it's not, right? And so I think astrology first gives that acceptance of like who you truly are. And yeah, of course, we can see the weak points. And I'm always very honest in readings when I see like very afflicted houses, or if I see a very fallen planet, I will tell them like, yeah, here's a point of your chart that's more difficult. And you do have to work harder at this. And this is a difficult thing, right? Like I'm not sugarcoating in readings and telling someone, oh my God, your life's amazing and beautiful and nothing bad's ever going to happen. It's not that, but it's also that from that place of like truth and honesty in a chart reading, then someone has all that free will to work within that energy, right? And try to utilize it to the best of their ability. So it's like a guide or a map is how I view astrology more than anything else. It's like, think about being born and imagine someone just like gave you a map of, hey, here's how you can best work with yourself and your energy in this lifetime, and there you go. Wow, that's pretty cool that that exists. Another note on it is like Vedic astrology is obviously very different than Western astrology in the sense that it's more pinpointed analysis. It is more predictive in a lot of ways. And when I say predictive, I don't mean future predictive. I actually just mean life story predictive, where it's like, if I see a chart where like 3 or 4 things are showing me that someone is divorced, like most of the time they're divorced. Like if I really, really see something in the chart, like, yeah, it's played out. Or if someone has like so much weakness in their 9th house of father, like, yeah, they have a difficult relationship with their father, right? So there's that balance of like, if something is really, really happening astrologically, it's going to play out. But the way that you work within that and the way that you move within that is that beauty of free will and that beauty of acceptance in the circumstance, and then using it to the best of your ability, right? So I have charts where I've had a client for years. I mean, she started seeing me in maybe like 2020. And one of the first things I saw in her chart was like a lot of issues with her father, right? And they had this like lifelong, really crazy relationship. And then she had this transit where it was like, wait, you can actually kind of heal that relationship, because Jupiter started transiting her 9th house of the father, and she was in, I think, a Jupiter dasha. And I was like, I know that it's like really hard with your father, but this transit can actually bring some healing at this time. And she was like, that's so crazy, because we've actually been trying to heal our relationship, right? So even though there's like these set points of the chart where it's like, ooh, this is difficult, this is a difficult house, things can always shift, and then transits can come along and it's like, wait, at this point you can heal that. You can work through that. You can clear this, right? And so there's also so much healing in astrology. Like to me, I think getting your astrological chart done is like a healing experience in itself, because it's like, oh, it's like a weight is lifted. You're like, oh my God, okay, everything is exactly as it's meant to be. Like my life experience, it is exactly as it's meant to be, right? It's happened the way it was meant to happen. And I am exactly who I'm meant to be. There's that beautiful like weight lifted sort of energy. And then there's also so much healing that can come from astrology of like, yeah, this is a karmic experience, or this is a heavy part of my chart, but I want to heal that and I want to work through that, right? And I'm trying to think of an example of my chart of something I might have like healed in the chart that maybe is more difficult. I would say for me, a lot of it is my 10th house. So I have like Saturn with K2 in my 10th house hit by the sun, right? That's 3 malefics on my 10th house. So a big thing for me has been really trying to build my career path in my own way that feels fulfilling and feels less restrictive, because Saturn K2 can feel very restrictive, and until you do the right things, I talk about this a lot, but I never enjoyed working ever. Never, my whole life, right? Like I have Saturn with K2, 3 malefics hit my 10th house of work. That's a quote unquote set part of my chart, right? Because there's so much malefic influence into my 10th house. But the healing aspect is like, wait, but what if you do something that's like a K2 sort of career, right? What if you do something that is not the traditional path, and what if you work within this as opposed to trying to fit something that's never going to work and like never going to make you happy. And that's like a healing part of my chart, right? Is like, okay, now I do work that actually does fulfill me and makes me happy, but it's still Saturn K2. It's still never going to be the thing that I love more than anything else, right? It just is what it is. And through that radical acceptance, I actually just found so much healing in that energy of the 10th house of, wait, you know what? I don't want a huge career. I want to be really good at what I do and like my niche, but I don't need to be on all the podcasts. I don't need, like, I'm good. Like, I'm going to do it my way. And that's what feels good to my chart. So there's that first acceptance, and then that energy of let's work within this, let's work within these karmas and utilize it to the best of our ability, essentially. So to me, why astrology? Because there's so much self-realization and self-acceptance that comes through it. And then there's also so much healing that can be done from that place of, hey, this is who I am. This is who I'm always going to be at my core, but let me move my free will within these experiences and do the best I can do. So like another example is Sati Sati. I talk about this a lot because it was the past 7.5 years of my life. I was in Sati Sati. So yeah, I'm going to talk about it, but I talk about the fact a lot that like if I knew about Sati Sati before going into it, I would have had so much more like clarity through that experience. Like, oh my, I needed a Vedic astrologer before I started Sati Sati. Lord knows, right? But I went into Sati Sati without much context or much wisdom about that 7.5 year long transit. And when I found when I got the clarity of, oh, I was in Sati Sati for 7.5 years, it was almost like this huge weight was lifted off my shoulders. And I was like, oh, of course it was like that. Of course it was that way because I was in the Sati Sati transit, right? So that acceptance, that clarity, that knowledge is like a huge weight lifted off of you. And then you move from that place of awareness and you move with so much more grace. Like, I say this a lot, but I think astrology allows you to move through life with a lot of grace and a lot of acceptance as opposed to like fighting tooth and nail against all these things that are happening or against all these experiences. It's not that. It's about moving within difficult periods with grace and like, okay, it's Sati Sati, but we're going to get through this and it's going to be really good at the end of it if I do the hard work, right? Or, ooh, I'm in a Rahu Dasha. Get ready for a wild ride. Let's buckle on in. So it's like that consciousness and that awareness that you get beforehand allows you to move with a lot of grace and free will. And anyone I know that studies astrology or loves astrology, they're always just really like self-realized in a lot of ways, right? Like they have a lot of acceptance about themselves and who they are, like even to the point where I have this one client who I think he's so funny because he's very Saturn, like he is such a Saturn kind of guy. He works in finance, he works in banking, he's very Saturn, but he also loves astrology because he grew up, his uncle, I believe, was a Vedic astrologer, so he had some context of astrology. And he'll say these things and he's like, yeah, but that's just my Saturn. That's just who I am. And I'm like, you're absolutely right. You are absolutely right. You are very Saturn and that's who you're meant to be, right? And so it gives us a lot of self-acceptance and also just knowledge about who we are, right? Because I firmly believe that like, until you fully know who you are and fully accept who you are and fully embrace who you are, until that point, I think life feels a little bit, I don't know the word. Like, I think when you have that self-acceptance aspect, life opens up a lot and becomes a lot more open for you because you're coming from a place where it's like, you know who you are and you know who you are not, and you know what you want and you know what you don't want, right? There's this open energy about that, like a really magnetic, beautiful energy that comes from that. And so I think there's so much power in doing that work to find self-realization or self-acceptance. And when I say self-realization, I feel like maybe that sounds dramatic. Like, it doesn't mean that you have to go study with the gurus, go meditate on a mountain. To me, self-realization is just like actually knowing who you are and doing the work that it takes to understand yourself and understand your psyche and your past and your present and how it all connects and why things have happened a certain way, right? Because that's the work that a lot of people don't want to do. A lot of people don't want to do it, right? But the happiest people I've ever met have done that work and gone to so much depth within who am I, why am I here, why have things happened a certain way. And then through that process, so much acceptance and happiness can come as well too. All right, so another point I want to bring up about why I find astrology so beautiful and impactful is it gives someone hope, but like a real sense of hope when they're going through something difficult, that like, oh, it's gonna get better. And again, not a false sense of hope, not like, oh, everything's gonna be magical and beautiful when you get out of your Rahu Dasha and go into your Jupiter Dasha, but like true hope in a sense of you're going through this like Saturn transit or you're in a Rahu Dasha, things are a little bit more intense and they're more difficult, but in 4 years or 5 years, you go to this time period and oh my God, it's gonna get so much better. Like I think about the start of my Sadhisati, and I just remember, and I say this a lot, but I get like a visceral reaction when I remember the beginning of my Sadhisati. I'm like, oh God, but I can think back to the start of that transit, which is now almost 8 years ago, which is pretty wild. But when I was starting that transit, I just didn't feel like it was going to get better. I was like, oh God, this is awful. You know what I mean? Like it felt really, really, really dense. And it almost felt like I was like moving through this like mud, I was like trying to like drag my feet through it or something. And I look back to that time period and how I felt 8 years ago. And then when I got out of Sadhisati and then Jupiter started transiting my first house, and I was like, oh, I literally feel like life is so amazing. And so if someone gave me that context when I was starting Sadhisati of no, it's going to get so much better, I think I would have felt a lot of peace through that as well too. There's also that really powerful aspect of astrology is the hope that comes from knowing that if you're going through something difficult, it's always going to shift. Everything is always shifting. But also, if you're in a really amazing window and then, things might get a little bit more difficult, it's like embrace that really amazing time period as well too. Like write it out, live your best life in those windows as well too. Like an example is the Jupiter return. I got lucky because I actually got gifted this astrology reading when I was about to go into my Jupiter return, which is a really, really good time in astrology if you're having your Jupiter return. And the astrologer was like, hey, you're about to go into your Jupiter return. This was about, I guess this was like 4 or 5 years ago. And she was like, you're about to go into your Jupiter return. Ask people for whatever you want. Like, you're going to be lucky. You're going to be super blessed. She was like, anything that you really desire this year, go for it. And I remember I was in my Jupiter return. I think I had just started my business. And it was that way. Like, it really was that way. Like, I was getting all this, like, money. Money was coming to me in weird ways. People were, like, reaching out to me in business, and they're like, hey, we want to have you on this podcast. And my Etsy business at that time was doing really well. It was such a beautiful window, and that astrologer told me that. She was like, you're going to have a really good year. It's your Jupiter return. Like, utilize that. Right? So it's also when you're in really good windows, you want to know about it so you can embrace it as well too. All right, so the main consensus that I wanted to get to in this video is what is the power of astrology and why? What is the why behind it? Because I think a lot of times people can get lost in certain things, right? Like it's easy to get lost in astrology and be like, oh my God, what's this day gonna look like? What's this month gonna look like? And get overly controlling about it, or maybe lose the magic and the essence of astrology, which to me, the magic is that self-acceptance and that radical acceptance. And then also utilizing your free will and still making your own choices to move your life forward, essentially. It's not supposed to be something that dictates or controls or stops someone from living their life. It's supposed to be something that empowers you and gives you guidelines and like a roadmap for when is a good time for this, when's a bad time for this. And the thing about it is like, There is so much free will that exists. I could tell someone, hey, maybe this is a good time for this, and this would be a really great time for this, and they could not do it, and that's fine too. You know what I mean? That's fine. Like, everything is going to happen as it's meant to happen regardless of astrology. It's more so just a guide or a map, and what you will find is, for the most part, people who are really aligned and happy in their life, they're already doing the things that the astrology is telling them, right? Like, they're already on that path, they're already doing the things, and they're like, that's so funny, I'm doing all this, I'm exactly doing it all. And I'm like, yeah, because you're aligned and you're following your soul essence, right? So it's also very common for people to already know all these things, already be doing all these things. It's just further confirmation more than anything else. All right, so I hope you guys enjoyed this philosophical sort of viewpoint into why I study astrology, because I think it's really important with anything you do in life that you should come back to the why of it. It's like, why am I doing this? That's really important, actually, because I think a lot of people don't ask that question. So I try to ask myself very often, especially if I'm going through like a rebrand with my business, or if I'm trying to create some new offerings, or if I'm really like fine-tuning my website, I'll always come back to, why am I doing this? What is my intention? Why did I get into astrology? Why did I start this business in the first place? Because it's been 6 years now. When I first started, even though I started very small on Etsy and I was doing other things as well too, when you're doing something for 6 years, you have to check in and be like, why? What is the why behind why I'm doing it? And how can I make sure or check in with that like the reasoning is still pure and still from a really good centered place as well too. All right, so let me know your guys' thoughts down below. What do you think about my viewpoint of astrology? Do you guys feel like you've gotten a lot of acceptance and use out of astrology? What has your experience been? Because also my Jupiter and Sagittarius going on all these side philosophical viewpoints, but I do think as well too, not everyone is meant to study astrology. Like, it's not for everyone. And I think a lot of times people ask me, they're like, oh, does it annoy you when someone doesn't believe in astrology? And I'm like, no, not at all. I actually could care less. Like, why would I want someone to believe in something that isn't for them? Like, I could actually care less if someone believes in astrology or doesn't, because it's not for everyone either, right? Like, I think you find astrology if it's meant for you, and if it's not meant for you, like, great, it's not meant for you, right? If someone has a super afflicted 9th house and their Jupiter's fallen and Jupiter's hit by a bunch of malefics, they're not going to really want to study astrology, right? It's not in the chart. Another aspect of it is astrology is either for you or it's not. Like, it's not going to be for everyone, and that's okay too. Like, why would it matter? So I think if you are called to astrology, there's a reason for that. All right, so don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe for so much more content coming soon. Yeah. So we will talk soon. Let me know your thoughts on this video down below, and also maybe comment some suggestions for further videos as well. I personally really love these videos where I just talk about like my viewpoints and my beliefs about things, because you guys know I have a really strong Jupiter. So let me know if you guys enjoy these more personal videos as well too. And yeah, all right, I'm sending all the love. We'll talk soon. Bye guys.